Okay, hey folks, Mark Locklear here with a quick screencast on Chapter 9, and this is how to work with functions. So this, in my opinion, is a fun chapter. It's sort of a smattering, so I'm not going to go into a bunch of detail on the different things. I think what I'm going to do is just talk a little bit about functions in general, try to keep them sort of as general as I can, and then maybe we will work on one of the modified exercises just to give you a sense of how I would approach a given problem. So let me share. Okay, so yeah, I'm just going to step through a handful of these. So first off, how to use functions. So this is going to walk through strings, how dealing with strings, dealing with numeric data, so numbers, dates and times. It covers if statements and then covers regular expressions toward the end. I'm going to skip the ranking and the analytic stuff. In my opinion, that's outside the scope of a sort of intro MySQL class like this. But the other stuff is super applicable to just sort of general work, whether you're a database administrator or even just a web developer, data analytics, data wrangler, data engineer. All of those titles are jobs where you could conceivably be using these kinds of tools to be able to manipulate data inside your database. And the cool thing I like about this too is this is not just a MySQL thing. All of these functions you would do to manipulate data in any programming language. And I mean, it really is a case of, I mean, to be honest, before I taught this class, I hadn't dug this deep into all the various functions that MySQL has, but it's the same stuff you find in Ruby. It's the same stuff you find in Python. It's the same stuff you find in Java, C++, JavaScript, on and on and on. So that being said, it behooves you, if you're going to stay in software development or any kind of data analytics, anything where you're dealing with data, all of this stuff is going to be super applicable. Okay. So strings, I'm just going to hit a few of these. We've worked with concat, I think, a little bit at this point, but at any rate, when you're concatenating data or strings, that means you're sort of pulling those strings together into a single text field or text object. Trim is a very common one. Again, you'll find that in other programming languages. Often you're wanting to remove or trim some piece of data from a given string, so that's a super common one. Length is a real common one. You're often trying to find the length of a string so you can do some operation with it. Same with locate. You're often looking for the occurrence of a particular character or set of characters, and something like locate is going to give you an index or a starting point where you can look for that. And so these just so go on and on. Insert, replace, substring. Again, these are just very common tools across the board, not just MySQL, but in all programming languages. And I mean, one of the things you'll do out in the real world is when you need to do something like this, you may do it at the MySQL level. As a web developer, in the work that I did, most of the time I would do it at the application level. So this stuff lives inside the code base. So, I was Ruby on Rails is where I spent most of my time. So that's I would generally do this inside Ruby again. But all of these the functions, while they're not exactly the same from language to language, they generally do the same sorts of things. So again, this is going to be applicable not just for MySQL, but for other things too. Handful of examples here on how these work. Generally, you're just you're using the keyword for whatever the function is, and then you're passing some piece of data to it. So yeah. Let's look at parsing. So yeah, there's just more examples of how to parse a string. So let's look at examples of numeric data. So numeric data, these are generally sort of math-based functions. I think we've talked about rounding some at this point. You can also truncate. You can do things like ceiling and floor. Again, very common in other programming languages. If it's not called ceiling or floor in other programming languages, it's going to be there's some other name for it, but generally sort of works the same way. absolute values, sign, square root, power, random number. Again, very common, regardless of the programming language you're going to be coding in. Goes into detail about floating point numbers. Lots of times if you end up working in a code base that's dealing with money and financial data, lots of times floating point variables and data types are going to be very important in those environments. Date time, super common. Again, dates are important. Think about all of the things you do out on the web or on your phone. If you're signing up for a form, if you're buying tickets to an event online, obviously the date is super important. So MySQL, just like other languages, gives you a ton of flexibility with regard to not only getting a date, but how it's stored, and then the ability to be able to manipulate a date. So it either looks so you can format it a certain way on the screen. Sometimes it's just an aesthetics thing, and from a product manager, someone like that might have a requirement for a date to be in a specific format. Or you could have a situation where you might be exchanging data from one system to another. Again, you can imagine a scenario where maybe you've got an application and you're using a credit card. You're using a credit card service to actually bill people and gather money. In that case, when someone inputs that date, they're going to input their card number. There's always an expiration date associated with a credit card. Then you're going to send the credit card data off to some third-party service that's probably going to handle the charge for you. You're probably not going to code that internally, so you might need to, again, you may be getting the date from the user in one format, but when it's actually sent off to a third-party service, you need to manipulate or change that date format to fit what the third-party service needs. So again, just a very common thing that you would do from a programming standpoint. Extracting, this just goes through extracting individual values for a date. Again, you just never know when you're going to need to do it, so you've got full flexibility. MySQL is going to give you full flexibility to be able to pull out and manipulate any of these pieces of data. And then this is the full formatting part. We talked about if you want to change the format. And again, you could apply these functions prior to actually saving the data in the database if you want it in a certain format, or this could be something that gets applied to data when it's pulled out, and either before you display it on a screen or before you send it off to some other third-party service. This percent sign along with the letter is super common. I know for a fact Ruby and Python use this format, and I suspect other programming language, JavaScript does too. Parse date is often what you'll see in other programming languages, but again, this idea of using the percent sign and then in some cases upper or lowercase m for month, d for day, y for year. You can get any combination of date formats that you want using functions like these. So calculations is also important, whether you're wanting to add to a date. Again, you can imagine a scenario, let's say you're using something like Airbnb or a hotel app where you're choosing a particular night that you're going to check in on, and then you're going to stay for three nights. Something like that would be a scenario where you would want to know days. Think about from an insurance standpoint, someone has active insurance that starts on a certain date. Maybe, it's going to go through the end of whatever the particular payroll month is, and that month could have anywhere from 28 to 31 days in it, depending on the month. So just little things like that. You never know what kind of calculations and functions you're going to need to do based on date diff. So the difference in two dates, how many days and maybe even hours might span between two different dates. You might think about a rental car business, let's say, depending on the date that the car was picked up versus when it was actually turned back in. They're going to be charged based on that. So again, all kinds of scenarios you can use for dates. Searching for dates, that's going to be important. You may be, again, you can imagine a reporting system where maybe someone is looking at an individual's account and they say, okay, a transaction happened on a particular date. So you would want to search the database, search a date field in a database based on a certain date. And again, and again, as I said, this is you really have full flexibility here at the application level. So let's say, again, you're dealing with a web application that uses a Ruby or Ruby on Rails front end. Like a lot of that date manipulation could be done there before the query is actually sent to the database, or it could be an actual MySQL call where you're using the tools or functions within MySQL to search a particular date. Same for searching time. Other functions here. So you've probably seen case statements if you've had I think this is probably covered in PHP, but I know for sure in Java and C++ we cover this, but you can do case statements, which sort of are more sophisticated if statements. An if statement usually checks on a single condition, but often you want to check on multiple conditions. So in this case, they've got an example of a case statement that based on the terms ID, it's going to tell you how many days until I guess in this case an invoice is due based on various case statements. I mean, and again, this uses the case and then when keywords to determine those, so something like that. And just a more sophisticated example here where we've got case, when, and then they're using a date diff function to make it a bit more sophisticated. If and null if, those are pretty straightforward. I won't go into those deep. Irregular expressions was the last one I wanted to cover. And I try to sort of hit regular expressions wherever I can because they're super important. And often, lots of times, they're in a lot of programming classes, not just at AB Tech, but I've seen students at other places that get 4-year computer science degrees that, either don't know regular expressions or haven't spent a lot of time doing them. And as a developer, they're invaluable and you will use them a ton, and they're super important when it comes to string manipulation sorts of things. And the coding exercise example we're going to do here is we're going to use a regular expression to do that. In this case, this regular expression like, and then there's regular expression substring. So the regular expression substring function returns the first substring that matches a given pattern. And then if a matching substring isn't found, then it returns null. So you often can do a check on that. But this regular expression substring is what I'm going to use. You don't have to use that. Again, there are various, a few different flavors of them, if you will. Every programming language, I mean, going back to at least C++, I would say every programming language within the last 30 years has an implementation of regular expressions. They're often referred to as flavors. So the flavors are slightly different from language to language, but you can, if you Google regular expression checker or regular expression REPL, you can find testers online that are super handy, so you can sort of test it out. You can test it out in a web-based environment first before you actually implement it inside code. But again, it's just, in general, regular expressions super handy for any kind of string manipulation or checking or validation that you want to do. And again, they're found in all modern programming languages. So with that, I am going to, actually, we're just going to minimize this, and then I'm going to pause for 1 second. Okay, so I'm going to do the homework exercise we're going to look at is going to be the modification where I ask you to modify number 5. And it says, I'm just going to read through it real quick. It says, imagine you want to create and store a default password for all employees in this table. So I'm asking you to create a column called password, and then the password similar to the password we used for this class, what you all use to log into your Linux server in MySQL is you're going to, the password is going to be in the format of capitalized first initial plus last name plus today's date, and then we'll put a exclamation at the end. So this is the sample solution for exercise number 5. And in fact, I'm going to, like, generally what I like to do if I'm making a modification like this, I'll create a new file and I'm going to paste that in there. So that way I'm not monkeying with the student files. I've always got that to get back to if I want to. And in fact, if I want to sanity check this, I'm going to go ahead and run it. I've already logged in and used the in this case, it's the AP database. So you can see there the make this a little bigger. We can see there that the existing query runs, so it gives us exactly what we want. So that's a good thing. So maybe what I'll do is move down here, and I'm going to paste it in again. Like, this is where I'll make my modifications at. So the way I'm going to start this is I'm going to get rid of some of the clutter here. And what I can do is, really all I want is employee name. I want to be able to see that. So I'm going to get rid of that. And then I do get rid of maybe last name too. So let's see if this will run. No, that won't run. Maybe the comma shouldn't be there. Okay, so I'm going to start off with that just so I've got the name there. And what I'm going to do is just slowly start adding each of these pieces for the password. And again, I'm not going to do the entire thing for you, but I'll sort of slowly, hopefully work up to it, and it will, yeah, as we sort of get closer to it, it'll sort of make sense. So first thing I'm going to need is a concat statement, right? Because I'm asking you to take these little various pieces of information: first initial, last name, the date, and then this exclamation point, and I'm going to combine all those. So, like, first thing I'm going to do is do a concat statement. So if I do concat, and then I'll go ahead and put that in there, and I'm just going to, like, just sanity check. And make sure this runs. Let's see, I probably need a comma here, maybe. Okay, so that was just, I'm just sort of sanity checking that my concat statement runs there and does what I want it to. So this works. Sandy, check that. So, like, what I would do here is, the requirements that I gave you. Again, the password is going to be a capitalized first initial, last name, date, and then exclamation point. So I'm going to actually just, like, as placeholders, I'm going to put that in. So for instance, this first one is going to be cap. I'm just going to say cap first name. And then, just sort of make it pretty. I'm going to bring this down and put this in line here. And then the second one is going to be, and then so let me go ahead and put that there. And then let me go ahead and put a comma. Well, let's just leave that there. And so then the next one is going to be capitalized, and then, yeah, the next one is last name. And then let me just sanity check that real quick, make sure I didn't break anything. Okay, I like it. And then, so then the next one is going to be the date. I'm just going to say today's date. And then the last one is going to be, just put the exclamation in like that. And then let's run that in there. Sanity check that. Good, I like it. So now we just need to sort of join these things together, so now we need to work on each one. So for instance, the date is pretty straightforward-ish. Yes, I've already solved this off camera, so I'm not just like doing this off the top of my head. But for instance, I can put that in, right? The date format, then, so we can use CUR date, current date, or we can use the current date method that's going to give us the current date. And don't worry about for the assignment, don't worry about like what date it is. Just again, you want to do something like current date. So then let me copy that and see if that works. There you go. Good. So I've got, yeah, today's February 22nd, 2024. So you can see that there. That looks nice. Last name, we already were getting, I think we were already getting last name up here, right? This was in the sample solution. So let's cut and paste that in for last name. So put that bad boy in there. Let's run that and see how that looks. Oh, let's see. You have an error in your syntax. There's something as last name. So it's not jumping out at me what the issue is. Let me pause for a second and see how quickly I can troubleshoot that. All right, no cigar there, not quite as straightforward to grab. You'd have to grab the entire chunk for this to work. However, I will show you. Now, this is kind of ugly, but again, it's using a regular expression. There may be an easier way to do it, so feel free to do that. But essentially, this is grabbing from employee name, using that substring to grab the letters. You probably don't even need this, but you're grabbing that chunk, and then it's grabbing the just after the first position, it's grabbing the entire name, and then it's also lowercasing it too. So if we grab this whole chunk, and let's run insanity check that. Yeah, I got 2 commas at the end here. So we've got that now. So we've got the last name. Now we still need to lowercase it. Yeah, we still need to lowercase the last name. We would probably want to remove any special characters for O'Sullivan, but that's not that I won't make that a requirement. But if you were doing this in the real world, that and if you just want to go the extra mile, you could probably pretty easily come up with a regular expression that would do that for you. But you see here, we've got the last name, then we've got our date, and then we've got our exclamation point at the end here. So I'm going to stop there. I just sort of wanted to walk you through that. Again, the thing with regular expressions too is they're super flexible, so there's not any one way to do it. I mean, this is a fairly sophisticated one, but this is probably about right for just trying to get the last name and make sure it's lowercase, because they're often they often can be fairly sophisticated. But Google is your friend. Maybe even ChatGPT is going to be your friend here too. So don't feel bad about using those regular expressions. I mean, they're super powerful, but you're not expected to just be able to look at the documentation and figure out how to write them. So yeah, you'll want to flesh this out, the last name, a little more, and then you'll want to get your capitalized first initial. Did I get that? Yeah, actually, I had this wrong. This is actually first initial. First initial, all lowercase last name, the date, and then the exclamation point. Okay. Anyway, that's just a little about how, notice that sort of structured way of, okay, let me put placeholders in for the different things and then sort of figure out each one in this iterative process, if you will, of sort of building up to your final query that's going to do what you want. All right. That is all for now. Good luck, and always let me know if you have questions.